Welcome to the Rocks Lab. This week, our activities, content, and assignments will help you be able to do the following. 1. Understand how igneous, sedimentary, and metamorphic rocks form in the rock cycle. 2. Recognize the textures that characterize each rock type. And 3. Identify different rocks in a hand sample. First, we'll start with some background information to provide you context for this week's lab. Rocks are a naturally occurring aggregate made up of minerals and/or earth materials that make up the majority of Earth's surface. While the minerals we looked at previously had a definite chemical composition and specific crystal structure, rocks are more likely to have varying compositions as they are made up of multiple minerals in a range of combinations. Rocks are generally grouped into three major categories: igneous, sedimentary, and metamorphic. These three rock types are organized largely by characteristics that help scientists infer the processes that created each type. Rocks are created through a variety of processes involving the workings of the rock cycle. The rock cycle is defined as the series of processes that slowly change rocks from one type to another. It's important to remember that there is no beginning or ending point to the rock cycle. Rocks can change to any type at any time, depending on environmental conditions. Igneous rocks are formed by the cooling of magma or lava near Earth's surface. The term igneous comes from the Latin ignis, meaning fire. Igneous rocks are classified in three ways: by their composition, their texture, and their origin. Scientists use the overall color of the rock sample to make an approximation of its composition and the amount of silica, or silicon dioxide, in the magma or the lava as it cooled. Rocks with mostly feldspar and silica-based minerals are called felsic and are often light or pink-colored. Rocks with more magnesium and iron are called mafic and have a darker color. Igneous rocks can also have an intermediate composition between felsic and mafic, and often those have a salt and pepper type appearance or are light gray in color. Rocks with dark and green minerals are referred to as ultramafic. The texture of igneous rocks provides valuable information about the environment in which they formed. For example, igneous rocks with large crystals, known as coarse-grained, must have cooled slowly enough for visible crystals to form. Igneous rocks with small crystals must have cooled more rapidly, preventing the crystals from growing very large. Finally, igneous rocks that appear glassy must have cooled so rapidly that no crystals were able to form at all. Another type of texture you'll find in this lab that is helpful for identifying igneous rocks is the presence of vesicles. This texture is known as vesicular. Vesicular rocks are formed during volcanic eruptions when a rapidly cooling lava freezes while still containing a high concentration of gas bubbles. These bubbles remain as open holes known as vesicles. The texture of igneous rocks helps us to infer their origin. Coarse-grained textures indicate that the rock formed from the crystallization of magma within Earth's crust. Because the magma was insulated and allowed to cool slowly, larger crystals had time to develop. This type of rock is known as an intrusive igneous rock. Fine-grained or glassy textures indicate that the rock formed from the rapid cooling of lava on Earth's surface. The lava cooled too quickly to form large crystals, or, in the case of glassy textures, any crystals at all. This type of rock is known as an extrusive igneous rock. Metamorphic rocks are formed by the alteration of other rocks, including other pre-existing metamorphic rocks, due to extreme heat and/or pressure. There are two main types of metamorphism: contact and regional. Regional metamorphism involves high heat and pressure. Regional metamorphism occurs over very large areas, typically in response to stress from plate tectonics. This commonly occurs in the folding and stress associated with mountain building at continental-continental convergent plate boundaries. The stress usually occurs in one major direction, and typically forms foliated rocks including slate, phyllite, schist, and gneiss. Characteristics of regionally metamorphosed rock include foliation, banding, and folding. Foliated rocks show layering caused by the alignment of mineral grains, whereas non-foliated rocks do not. Foliation happens when mineral grains are reoriented in one direction to cope with extreme pressures, like stacking a pile of books to save space. Foliation occurs along a gradient, as shown in this image. The lowest grade of metamorphic rock, slate, exhibits a type of foliation called slaty cleavage. This foliation is characterized by closely spaced, parallel planes of weakness that give a rock, like slate, its ability to split into thin, platy layers. Intermediate grade metamorphic rocks, like phyllite and schist, exhibit schistosity. Schistosity is a type of foliation characterized by the parallel alignment of platy minerals, sometimes resembling the scales on a fish. High-grade metamorphic rocks, like gneiss, tend to exhibit gneissosity. Gneissosity is characterized by not only parallel alignment of platy minerals, as seen in schistosity, but also the banding of felsic and mafic minerals. This banding results in visible alternating light and dark bands in the rock. Metamorphic rocks that exhibit no foliation occur as a result of contact metamorphism. Contact metamorphism occurs when a hot igneous intrusion comes into contact with cool rock. The metamorphism caused by the high temperatures only radiate a relatively small distance from the intrusion. This zone of contact metamorphism is called the contact aureole and is typically less than 10 kilometers in size. The contact aureole, where the surrounding rock has been baked by the heat of the magma intrusion, exhibits a higher degree of metamorphism closest to the heat source. Characteristics of contact metamorphism include a lack of foliation and sometimes recrystallization. In these rocks, you will not see any visible alignments of mineral grains. Rocks resulting from contact metamorphism are typically composed of one mineral. The two most common examples of non-foliated rocks are quartzite and marble. Sedimentary rocks are formed by the accumulation and cementation of smaller rock particles called sediments. These rocks are categorized by the source of those sediments. Biochemical rocks form from organic plant material or skeletons. Chemical rocks are precipitated out of a solution, like when seawater evaporates and leaves rock salt behind. And clastic rocks form when weathered and eroded fragments of other rocks get cemented together. Although sedimentary rocks only make up about 5% of Earth's crust, they represent 75% of all rocks exposed at the surface of our planet. Different types of smaller sediment particles are described by grain size, shape, and sorting. We can use these properties to help determine the source of sediment and the distance traveled from its original source. Transportation is the movement of sediment away from its source, and this typically occurs because of the movement of water, wind, or ice. When sediment is transported, the particles become rounder, as you see in a rock tumbler. The particles become smaller, and the particles are typically sorted by size. We can use the size, the roundness, and the sorting of sediments within a sedimentary rock to determine where they came from and how far they traveled from their original source. Chemical sedimentary rocks form by the precipitation of minerals from solution and often have a crystalline texture. Two common types of sedimentary rocks include chert, which forms in layers or nodules and precipitates from silicon-rich water. An example of chert is Ohio State gemstone flint. Evaporites, which form when salty lakes or seawater evaporates. An example of an evaporite would be rock salt. Clastic sedimentary rocks are the most common type of the three types of sedimentary rocks. These are composed of weathered material that has been transported, deposited, compacted, and cemented. Common types of clastic sedimentary rocks include breccia, which has gravel-sized grains that are angular and poorly sorted, conglomerates, which have gravel-sized grains that are rounded and poorly sorted, sandstone, which has sand-sized grains that are generally round and well sorted, and shale, which has clay-sized grains that are generally round and well sorted. Biochemical sedimentary rocks accumulate from the remains of organisms, typically shells or fossils, but can be anything created by plants, microorganisms, or animals. Common types of biochemical sedimentary rocks include 1. Coal, which forms from compressed plant materials and bogs and swamps. 2. Coquina, which is composed. Number 2, coquina, which is composed of compressed shells and typically forms in coral reefs. And number 3, fossiliferous limestone, which is composed of carbonates that are precipitated by organisms, typically found along the ocean floor. Sedimentologists study sedimentary rocks, structures, and grains because they reflect physical and chemical characteristics of source environments, contain direct and indirect evidence of life, can be interpreted to recreate Earth history, and may contain important minerals. These rocks can also act as a source of fossil fuels and water storage. Determining the type and characteristics of sedimentary rocks provides clues about Earth's history. For example, in Ohio, much of our bedrock is limestone. Because we know limestone forms in marine environments, we can infer that Ohio was once covered by an ocean. Next, we'll discuss information that you'll need to complete this lab. This lab has several safety considerations, similar to those of the last lab. We will be using hydrochloric acid. Use only 1 drop of acid when testing for a reaction. This dilute acid is a skin and eye irritant, which can cause skin redness, a burning sensation in the eyes, and can discolor or dissolve clothing. In the case of skin or eye contact, flush immediately with lots of water. Neutralize any spills with baking soda and wipe up with a wet paper towel. Dry the area and notify your TA. We will also be using glass plates to test the hardness of mineral samples that are in the rocks. Hold the glass plate flat against the tabletop. Do not hold the plate in your hand. Don't taste any of the minerals. A special property of some of the minerals that are in the rocks include a salty taste. If you suspect a mineral may taste salty, ask your TA. Wash your hands immediately after lab to remove any remaining residue. Finally, be sure to clean up after yourself and be considerate of your TA and your peers. There are no helpful hints specific to this lab. Mineral test kits will be provided by your TA. These will include dilute hydrochloric acid, a glass plate, a streak plate, a nail, a copper penny, and a magnet. Rock identification flowcharts and procedures will be provided by your TA, but will also be available on the instruction page in this week's Carmen module. Finally, all rock samples will be provided by your TA. The only digital item this week is a PDF of the rock identification flowcharts and procedure.